My name is Elise. I'm 38 years old. And I need to tell someone this story because if I keep it inside any longer, I think it might rot me from the inside out. It didn't start the night I slept over at my cousin's. That was just the moment the dam broke. But the cracks, they started long before. Quiet little fractures in a life that used to feel like mine. In a marriage that once felt like love. I've been with Owen since I was 22. He was the kind of man who made you feel chosen. He had this wild, irreverent charm that made you believe nothing else mattered except the way he looked at you. For years, I believed in us with the kind of faith people usually reserve for religion. I gave him everything, my time, my body, my future. And for a while, it felt like we were building something beautiful. We used to dance in the kitchen. At midnight. To no music. He used to kiss my shoulder before I got out of bed, even when I was half asleep. And when we fought, it was passionate, not cruel. It meant we cared. At least, that's what I told myself. But something shifted. Quietly. Slowly. Like fog rolling in until you can't remember the last time you saw the sun. It started with little things, like how his kisses started to land more on routine than on affection. Like muscle memory. Sometimes I'd lean into him, waiting for warmth, and all I'd get was a quick, dry press of lips and a distracted glance at his phone behind my head. There's this one moment I can't forget. About a year ago. I had just come out of the shower and he was sitting on the bed, scrolling. I wrapped my towel around myself and came up behind him, slid my arms around his neck. I kissed his cheek and he tensed, just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to feel it. Enough for my heart to stutter in that moment. He said, "I'm in the middle of something, babe," and peeled my arms off like they were a jacket he didn't want to wear anymore. I laughed it off. That's what you do when you don't want to face the truth. We still had sex. But it was different. Less about connection, more about obligation. Sometimes I felt like I was watching myself from the ceiling. Going through the motions. His hands used to explore me like a mystery. Now they moved like he already knew the ending. There were no questions in the way he touched me. No tension. No hunger. Just familiarity. It's a terrible thing, to be touched and still feel alone. I kept telling myself this was what long-term love looked like. That all couples fade. That passion has a shelf life, and I was selfish for wanting more. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was disappearing. That every day, a piece of me, the laughing, impulsive, sensual woman I used to be, was dissolving into the beige wallpaper of our life. I became efficient. Predictable. Quiet. I stopped dancing. I stopped buying lingerie. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror when I changed. Then last month, after yet another night of falling asleep back to back, I decided to take a weekend away. Just a break. I told Owen I was going to see my cousin, Nora, in the city. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Cool," he said. "Tell her I said hey." That night, at Nora's place, we stayed up talking too long. She fell asleep on the couch and gave me her son's room to crash in. I crawled into that unfamiliar bed in my old college t-shirt, feeling more like someone's forgotten memory than a woman in her prime. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with questions I didn't want to answer. And then, just past 2 a.m., the door creaked open. I turned my head. And there he was, her son. But that moment, and everything that came after, only happened because of what had already died inside me long before. The real story didn't start with his footsteps. It started the moment I realized I wasn't being seen anymore. And maybe I didn't even recognize myself either. Owen's a firefighter. He works 24-hour shifts, sometimes longer, depending on the calls. There were nights he came home with soot on his neck and blood on his boots, his voice hoarse from smoke. People love him. He's a hero in our town. They stop him in the grocery store to say thank you. They look at me like I'm lucky. And I guess I am, in some ways. But no one ever asks what it's like to love someone who spends more time running toward burning buildings than sitting still with you. No one talks about what gets left behind in the quiet. The week before I went to Nora's, we fought over laundry. That's what it sounded like, anyway. He dropped his gear bag in the hallway and I asked him, gently, or so I thought, if he could maybe stop leaving his smoky clothes near the front door. The smell seeps into the house, clings to the furniture. He didn't even look at me. You know what I deal with at work, and you're talking to me about laundry right now? It's not about the laundry, Owen, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. It's about feeling like I'm invisible in this house. Like nothing I say matters. That was the first crack. He stared at me like I'd grown two heads. You think I don't see you? Elise, I work my ass off to give us this life. I come home to you. Every time. Isn't that enough? He crossed the space between us and wrapped his arms around me from behind, like that was supposed to fix it. And I froze. Because yes, his arms were strong. His hands were familiar. But I didn't want to be held. I wanted to be heard. I don't want a hug right now, I whispered. He pulled back, wounded. So what do you want, Elise? A thank you card every time I walk through the door? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because I knew it wouldn't land. What I wanted couldn't be scribbled on paper. I wanted him to notice when I got quiet during dinner. To ask how I really was. I wanted him to remember that touch, for me, came after connection, not in place of it. I wanted the kind of intimacy that builds in the space between words, not just beneath the sheets. But instead, he thought sex was the glue. A few nights later, he tried again. He came into the bedroom shirtless, freshly showered. He slipped into bed and ran his fingers down my side. I pretended to be asleep. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. Somewhere deep under the exhaustion, the resentment, the years of unspoken needs, there was still love. But it felt like trying to light a match in the rain. He sighed and turned over. The space between us in bed that night felt wider than any fireline he'd ever crossed. The next morning, he made pancakes. He doesn't cook. I think that was his version of an apology. But I watched him from the doorway, flipping them awkwardly, brow furrowed, and all I felt was sadness. Because I could see he was trying. And he couldn't see that I needed something else entirely. That's the thing about long-term love. The damage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a soft, slow erosion. A misunderstanding that starts as a pebble and becomes a boulder before either of you realize you're standing on opposite sides. I didn't want to cheat. I didn't go to Nora's looking for anything. But I carried all of that heaviness with me when I left, every silence, every cold shoulder, every night I cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. And when her son walked in at 2 a.m., groggy and shirtless and surprised to see me, the look in his eyes didn't feel like lust. It felt like recognition. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Owen got home early last Friday. He texted me on the way, shift ended early. "Wanna take a nap together?" We used to love naps. They'd start wrapped in each other's arms and end tangled in the sheets, out of breath and laughing. But now, the idea of lying next to him made my stomach twist with something I didn't want to name. When he walked through the door, he looked tired, the kind of tired that makes your shoulders hang heavy, but he still smiled when he saw me. That part hurt the most. His smile hadn't changed. Mine had. He came over, slipped his arms around my waist from behind, and pressed a kiss into the curve of my neck. I froze. Just for a second. I knew he felt it. "Elise," he said softly, lips still against my skin, "you okay?" I forced a breath through my nose. "Yeah. Just a long day." "Then let me make it better," he murmured, turning me around, brushing my hair behind my ear like he used to. His hands moved to my hips. I felt his fingers tighten just slightly, the way they always did when he wanted more. And I wanted to want it. God, I wanted to want it. But instead, my body stiffened again. Like instinct. Like defense. He leaned in to kiss me and I let him, but I didn't kiss back, not really. His lips moved slow, deliberate, waiting for me to meet him halfway. I never did. When he pulled back, his brow furrowed. "You feel far away lately," he said. "You're not saying anything, but I feel it. Are we okay?" I looked up at him, his face still inches from mine, and the only answer I had was silence. He tried to make it playful, brushing a hand down my back and giving me a soft smack on the butt. It used to make me laugh. Now it made me flinch. I stepped away under the pretense of checking my phone. "Don't," I said before I could stop myself. "Don't what?" His voice was still calm, but I could hear the tension creeping in. "Don't try to fix it with touching." He blinked. "That's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to connect. We don't talk anymore, Elise." "You barely look at me." "Because when I do," I said, finally turning to face him, "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." There was a long silence. Then, "So you don't feel anything when I touch you?" he asked. Not angry. Just confused. Hurt. And I couldn't answer that either. Because the truth was worse than yes or no. The truth was, it depended. It depended on whether I'd slept the night before. Whether he'd remembered to ask how my day was. Whether I still felt like a person, or just a function, wife, cleaner, body, placeholder. He stepped back. "You know I love you, right?" I nodded, because I did know. That wasn't the problem. He tried again, softer this time, "So come here." I walked into his arms. Let him hold me. Let him run his fingers down my back. Let him kiss my forehead. And all the while, something inside me curled in on itself like a drying leaf. Because I kept hoping that if I let him love me the way he needed to love, maybe I'd feel close to him again. But every time he touched me without knowing what was going on inside me, I felt further away. I went upstairs before things could go further. Said I had a headache. He didn't follow. Lying in bed alone, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one, "Why does everything have to turn into sex?" It happened over dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, garlic bread, a bottle of wine Owen picked up on the way home. He was trying, I could see that. He'd lit a candle, dimmed the lights like it was some kind of date night, even though we were sitting in our own kitchen. I should have appreciated it. I wanted to. But everything he did lately felt like a cover-up. Like makeup over a bruise. We never actually talked about the pain, just kept dressing it up, pretending the illusion of closeness could pass for the real thing. He poured me a glass of wine and smiled across the table. "To us," he said. And that was it. That tiny, harmless phrase, "to us," broke something in me. I stared at the glass. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up. To us? I repeated, voice too quiet. He tilted his head. Yeah, is that a problem? And I don't know what happened. Something surged to the surface, sharp and messy and years in the making. You don't get to say that like it means something, I snapped, louder than I meant to. You don't just pour a drink, light a candle, and expect that to make it all okay. His brow furrowed, confused. I'm just trying to have a nice dinner, Elise. What's going on? What's going on? I laughed, but it was hollow. Ugly. You want to know what's going on? I feel like I'm screaming underwater and you're standing on the shore asking if I'm fine. He put his fork down. Okay, then tell me. Tell me what you need. I need you to see me, I said, voice cracking. Not just touch me. Not just sleep beside me. I need you to look at me and notice when I'm not okay. I need to not feel like I'm slowly dying in a house where I used to feel alive. Silence. His jaw clenched. I could see his defenses rising like a tide. You think I don't try? He said, low and controlled. I bust my ass at work, I come home and make you dinner, and somehow I'm the villain in your loneliness? That's not fair, Elise. I stood up, knocking my chair slightly. You think this is about dinner? About you being a provider? This is about me not knowing who I am anymore when I'm around you. About how I felt more like myself in a 10-minute conversation with my cousin's son than I have in a year with my own husband. The words were out before I could stop them. Owen froze. What? I covered my mouth with my hand. The silence that followed was deafening. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just stared at me, stunned, like I'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize. I didn't mean that, I whispered. But I wasn't even sure if it was true. He stood, slowly. I don't know what's happening to you, Elise. But I can't be the enemy for things you never said out loud. He left the room. Didn't slam the door. Didn't scream. Just left. And I sank to the floor beside the table, the wine untouched, the candle flickering like it knew something was dying here. I should have felt relief, maybe, like I'd finally said something that needed to be said. But all I felt was guilt. Guilt for saying too much. Guilt for not saying it sooner. Guilt for the way my chest fluttered when I remembered her son's gaze at 2 a.m., not lustful, not inappropriate, just present. Present in a way Owen hadn't been for a long time. And I hated myself for that. I curled my knees to my chest and pressed my forehead against them, whispering over and over, "What's wrong with me?" Because I wasn't even sure anymore. All I knew was, something had cracked wide open. And I didn't know how to put it back. A week passed. Then another. We didn't fight. We didn't talk either. Owen moved through the house like a ghost I used to know, polite, functional, hollow. He still made the coffee in the morning. Still took out the trash. Still put the remote in the same spot on the armrest, like muscle memory. But he didn't touch me. Didn't try. And the absence of that, of him, hit harder than I expected. One morning, I watched him from the hallway as he stood by the window, sipping coffee in the shirt I bought him last Christmas. His shoulders slumped, his free hand resting on the windowsill like it was holding him up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Maybe from the shift. Maybe not. He looked like a man carrying something he didn't know how to name. And for the first time I really saw it. I'd been so wrapped up in my own ache, my own loneliness, that I hadn't considered his. I hadn't wondered what it was like for him to come home to someone who recoiled at his touch. Someone who barely looked him in the eye anymore. This wasn't just my heartbreak. It was ours. And I missed him. God, I missed him. Not the version of him who kissed me out of habit or reached for me in bed when I wasn't ready, but the man who used to bring me sunflower seeds because he knew I liked the crunch. The man who once wrote "stay" on a sticky note and left it on my suitcase when I threatened to leave during one of our worst fights. I missed that Owen. And maybe, just maybe, he missed me too. But neither of us knew how to say it. We coexisted in silence. Dinners were short and filled with small talk that felt rehearsed. He told me about a fire in a mechanic's shop. I told him Nora's son had switched colleges. That made him glance up for a second. A flicker. Then nothing. The thing is, I think he wanted to reach for me again. But he was scared. And so was I. I found myself standing outside our bedroom door more than once, hand hovering over the handle while he slept inside. I wanted to crawl in next to him. I wanted to cry into his chest and say I didn't know how we got so far apart. But I didn't move. Instead, I sat in the guest room, scrolling through my phone, rereading the message Nora's son had sent me days after that night. Simple, respectful, but piercing. I hope you're okay. You seemed sad. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't inappropriate. It was just human. And somehow, it made me feel more whole than anything Owen had said in months. That scared me. Because if the smallest kindness from a stranger could reach me like that, what did that say about the state of my marriage? That night, I stared at the ceiling again, but this time, with a decision pressing into my chest. I could try to fight for us. Try to open the door again, even if I didn't know what waited on the other side. Or I could walk. Quietly. Gently. Before we ruined what little tenderness was left. I sat with that question until sunrise. And when the light finally broke across our bedroom wall, painting it in pale gold, I still didn't know the answer. But I knew I couldn't live in limbo much longer. Tomorrow, I would decide. The next evening, I found Owen asleep on the couch. The TV was still on, some old action movie playing low, and he was curled on his side, one arm under his head, still in his work clothes. His boots sat by the door, scuffed and tired, like him. I stood there for a long time, watching his chest rise and fall. There was something so familiar about it. The shape of him. The sound of his breath. It took me back to a version of us that felt like a memory now, falling asleep in the back of his truck after our first road trip, limbs tangled, skin sun-warm. Back then, love felt effortless. Now it felt like a language we'd both forgotten how to speak. Still, I knelt down beside the couch and touched his arm. He stirred, blinked at me through the haze of sleep. Elise? His voice was groggy, tentative. Can we talk? I whispered. He sat up slowly. We didn't move to the kitchen or the table. We stayed right there, knees touching in the half-light, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid. I don't know how to fix us, I said. I don't even know if we can be fixed. But I can't keep pretending everything's fine. He looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded. Me neither. Silence settled again. Not angry, just tired. I think we forgot how to be us, I said. Somewhere along the way, we stopped showing up for each other the way we needed to. I didn't say what I felt. And when I did, it was too late. His eyes welled just slightly, but he blinked it away. You're right. I stopped asking. I started assuming. I thought I was doing enough just by being here, but I wasn't with you. Not really. I reached for his hand. He let me. The warmth between our palms didn't feel romantic. It felt like grief. I don't think I can go back to how we were, I said. But maybe, we can figure out who we are now. If we both still want that. He exhaled, long and shaky. I want to try, he said. I just don't know how. Maybe that's the first honest thing we've said in months. He smiled, weakly. Then pulled me into him, slow, careful, like asking a question with his body instead of words. I let my cheek rest against his chest. He kissed the top of my head. It wasn't forgiveness. It was uncertainty. But it was something. We fell asleep like that, not as lovers, not quite as strangers. Just two people who had once been everything to each other, trying to find a way to be something again. You want to know the truth? It wasn't about the moment her son walked in. Not really. Yes, it was 2 a.m. Yes, I was vulnerable. Yes, he looked at me in a way I hadn't felt seen in a long time. But that night, and everything it stirred in me, was just a mirror. A sharp, unexpected reflection of everything I'd been denying for years. You don't fall out of love all at once. You drift. Quietly. In pieces. At first, I thought I was just tired. Tired from work. Tired from the house. Tired from being the version of myself that knew what to say, how to please, how to soften her edges just enough to keep the peace. But it wasn't just fatigue. It was emptiness. I was lonely. And not in the I miss company kind of way. In the I miss myself kind of way. Being in a long-term relationship, especially one that started when you were young, can be like living in a house you built together. Every room holds memories, laughter, inside jokes, comfort. But one day, you walk into the kitchen, and something feels different. You don't remember painting the walls that color. You don't recognize the furniture anymore. And then you realize, somewhere along the way, while you were tending to the house, you stopped tending to each other. That's what happened to Owen and me. He's a good man. He really is. Brave, loyal, steady. He did love me, probably still does in his own way. But he didn't see the ways I was shrinking. He thought holding me, or sleeping beside me, or making pancakes was enough. And maybe it would have been, if I hadn't needed something else entirely. It's not that I wanted someone else. I just wanted to feel alive again. Nor a son, he didn't touch me that night. He just stood there, sleepy and startled, and we talked. 10 minutes. Maybe less. But it was the way he looked at me when I spoke. Like my words mattered. Like I mattered. I didn't cross a physical line. But something in me did break open. And once it did, I couldn't ignore what I'd been burying for so long. Here's what I've learned: desire isn't always about sex. Sometimes it's about being wanted in the room, emotionally, spiritually, as a whole person. Sometimes it's about being asked, "What do you need?" instead of being assumed. Emotional intimacy is fragile. It dies in silence. It erodes in routine. It disappears in assumptions. And once it's gone, touch feels hollow. Even love feels distant. Owen and I are trying. Or at least we were, the last time I left. We had one real conversation, one that hurt more than any fight we ever had. But it was honest. And honesty, even when it breaks things, can sometimes be a beginning. Maybe we'll find our way back. Maybe we won't. But I'm no longer waiting for someone to guess what I need. I've stopped apologizing for needing to be seen. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're disappearing in your relationship, like you're a ghost in your own life, please hear me when I say this: you are not selfish for wanting more. You are not broken for craving depth, connection, intimacy. And you are not alone. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't leaving. It's staying in the same room, and saying, "This isn't working, and I want to understand why." That's love, too. The hard kind. The honest kind. The kind that either rebuilds, or sets you free. Either way, you finally get to come back to yourself. And that, I think, is where real healing begins.